Hi, good evening and welcome to Netzach Yisrael Daily Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Shir. Today we're going to learn Siman Tes, Hilchos Tzitzis, Voichav Aleph Seifim. The halachas of Tzitzis contains 21 Seifim. Today we're going to learn Aleph through Hey, the first 5. Seif Aleph. Gedoyle mitzvahs Tzitzis. The mitzvah of Tzitzis is so great. Sharei Kosov Shkola V'Tola Bakala Mitzvahs Kolov. That's so much so that the Torah compares it and depends on it, all the mitzvahs. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, the famous pasuk in the 3rd paragraph of Shema, you will see the tzitzis and you will remember by seeing them all the mitzvahs of Hashem. Tzitzis b'gematria tov reish. Tzitzis, the word tzitzis is gematria 600, quoting the Torah there. Shemayna chutim v'chamisha kasharim. I add up on top of this 600 the 8 strings of the tzitzis and the 5 knots, the 5 double knots that one makes on each corner. Harei tariag, the 600 plus 8 plus 5 adds up to 613. That corresponds and reminds us of the 613 mitzvahs that we're obligated in. Therefore, a person should be particularly careful that he has a talis cotton, that means a regular garment, besides for the talis that he wears during prayer. He should have a regular tzitzis, as we call them, that he should wear throughout the day. And it should really be white lamb's wool rather than cotton. V'gadol kashir, and it should be big enough, like the right measurement. That means at least 3/4 of an amma in length, which is about 13.5 inches. And a half amma in width, which is about 9 inches. And some are particular to have an extra big pair of tzitzis. That's an amma by an amma long, that's 18 by 18 inches. Those that have a talis cotton, a garment that is side up at the sides, that means more like a vest or an undershirt. A person who's wearing such a vest should ensure that most of the side is open, that can be seen, as opposed to sewn up. And it shouldn't even be connected through hooks or buttons. So if you can see in this diagram here, at the side where it's tied up, it's only a little bit tied up, it's only a little bit connected, as opposed to sewn all the way down. Most of this side should be open. Additionally, a person should be particular that he only wears that he has a big enough talis to wear while he's davening. In many communities, this is worn from boys when they're younger. The mainstream Ashkenaz minhag certainly is what a person only wears one from when he gets married. The German, the Yekisha communities typically wear them often from when they're bar mitzvah or even younger. And a person should be particular to have a beautiful talis. Likewise, all mitzvahs a person should try and do to make them as beautiful as possible. As it's written in the pasuk, and again we should be familiar with this from Oz Yosher, this is my God, and I will glorify him. V'darshinan and Chazal explain this pasuk, show yourself glorious before him when performing his commandments. And somewhat you should be particular to buy tzitzis from a trustworthy man, a trustworthy person, so you can be guaranteed that the tzitzis were spun and twined specifically for the sake of doing the mitzvah. The Aruch is kashir, and it should be long enough, like the shir, which we will see shortly, just of how long those tzitzis should be. Seif base. Someone who is, it's impossible for him to wear a wool pair of tzitzis, and instead he wears a linen pair. Wool tzitzis obviously are a lot warmer and a lot more difficult in a hot climate. Someone who's wearing a linen pair can't put on a wool pair of strings because of the prohibition of shatnas, of mixing wool and linen. So what should you do? There are some that come up with this idea that the corner of the tzitzis, where you hang the tzitzis from, at the corner of the beged, you should put a piece of leather and hang the tzitzis from there, all tzitzis. And of course, there are those that disagree and say that that isn't ideal, one shouldn't do that. So now we're going to talk about where exactly you're hanging the tzitzis from. So we're going to be talking about this corner here and how far away the hole should be. How far away the hole should be from the sides. So that's this side here and this side here. How far away should the hole be from where the tzitzis are hung from the edge of the garment? And we're going to talk about the edge of the garment too. That hole should not be further from the edge of the garment, neither on the length or the width of the garment, more than 3 agudolim. Well, how much is an agudol? Agudol is the width of a thumb. So look at this blue line at the top here, the width of a thumb. The width of a thumb, sorry. There are those that say that an agudol is measured from the narrowest part of the thumb, that is at the top, the blue line, running across. Now, how much an agudol is in practical terms? The Chazon Ish, at the larger scale, the Chazon Ish has its 2.4 centimeters. So obviously multiply that by 3. And Reb Chaim Noah on the smaller scale will say that this is just 2 centimeters. So typically the hole should be at least 7.5 centimeters away from the, should not be more than 6 centimeters away from the edge. Menachem Hachman came Ayin Shari Tshuva, he says, look in the Shari Tshuva that it's good to be particular, to be stringent about this. That means that it shouldn't be more than 6 centimeters altogether to follow Reb Chaim Noah's view. If it's further away than 3 agudolim, if it's more than 6 centimeters away, then that's not considered hanging at the corner of the beged, rather on the beged itself. And if it makes the hole further than that, further than 6 centimeters away, even though that if that hole is further away, but when he ties it, it creases the beged over here to the extent that the hole is really not so far away anymore. Mikol Mokum Puzzle, nonetheless, that invalidates the pair of tzitzis and it's no good. What happens if you realize that the hole is further away and you decide you're going to cut the pair of tzitzis to make the hole bigger, or cut the pair of tzitzis so that the hole is no longer that far away? Puzzle, that doesn't work. That's no good. Like we'll learn tomorrow, the mitzvah is to make a pair of tzitzis and not that it should be made. That means when you make the pair of tzitzis, they've got to be a kosher pair of tzitzis. Additionally, as much as the strings shouldn't be hanging more than 6 centimeters away from the edge, likewise they shouldn't be too close to the edge. What is too close? Until, that means the size of the first joint of the thumb up to the end of the nail. So if we look at, again, this diagram, the red line from the tip of the thumb up until the first joint, the strings should be hanging at least that far away from the edge of the beged. Because if it's lower than this, if it's closer to the edge than this, then the tzitzis are not considered hanging on the garment, on the corner, but rather under the corner. If the hole is not far enough like this measurement, but by pulling the knot, it folds the edge of the tallis, and now there is no longer the shear. That means if by doing the knot a little bit too tight, it creases the garment, and so that it's only about 2 centimeters away now, that's okay. Mikol makom kosher. You don't need to ensure that when you do up your knot, that the knot is loose enough that the corner does not get creased. Don't worry about it creasing. Likewise, if we look at go back to this first diagram, we notice that the edges of the tallis are smooth. Sometimes, especially on a tallis, you may have fringes, decorative fringes that are hanging. And it's a suffix, it's a doubt as to whether this counts towards the edge, as to whether this counts in the size of the larger garment or not. Therefore, you should really cut them off before you tie the tzitzis. And you'll note that the commercial talisim and tzitzis that we buy today don't have them on. Come on, Sif Vov, and again we'll learn about that tomorrow. Many people, when they make their talis cotton, that means the one that they wear on themselves throughout the day, have the minhag to put, instead of one dot over here, they place 2 dots next to each other. They're like the tseirei, the A sound that we have. And that way, the tzitzis, rather than go through one side to the other, hang more like a ring on the outside of the garment. See, Dalad. Embishas kashiras hatzitzis. Hoya hanekev rochoi kashia. Ve'achakach nikru katsasa nekev oisfasa talis ajad tzitzot hibepochos mishia rochot nekotza. If when you tie the tzitzis, everything was fine, the tzitzis were the right distance away from the edge, but then the hole in which the tzitzis are hanging it tears a little, so that the tzitzis are hanging closer to the edge. That does not invalidate the pair of tzitzis. Because the Torah is only bothered, the Torah is only particular that the tzitzah, that's the singular of tzitzis, hangs from the corner specifically while you're making it. As it says again from the Shema, and you shall make for them tzitzis on the corners of the garments. That means when you make the tzitzis, you have to ensure that they're the right distance away. If the hole gets enlarged by mistake and it hangs a little bit closer, that doesn't invalidate the pair. Nonetheless, writes Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it is ideal to create a seam around the hole to prevent this from happening. As we'll see more in Sif Yud Zayin. Likewise, at the edge of the talis, that it doesn't decrease, it doesn't tear and become smaller than the size of a thumb breadth. Finally, for today, Sif Hey, now we're going to discuss how exactly one should tie the tzitzis. So we're going to explain tying the strings, putting 4 strings through the hole, tying them, hanging them down, taking the 4 strings on each side, tying them around each other, and you've got one string that's longer than the other that's going to be called the shamash. And we're going to wrap that around the other 7 strings, so many times, do a double knot, and repeat the process 4 times. And we're now going to explain and go into a bit of detail on that. So, like we explained that there's 5 knots, which is part of how we get to the 613. The minhag is to make 5 knots, 5 double knots, that have 4 spaces between them. Now note that there are many different customs. What we are describing now is the main Ashkenaz custom. You'll notice that Sephardim and many others, including many Hasidim, have got different ways of tying their tzitzis. That means that we put 4 strings, 4 double strings, into the hole, but we tie them with 2 simple knots. That's what we call a double knot. V'kerech b'chota Aruch hanikra shamash shava karichos. We take the shamash, this long string, wrap it around 7 times around the other 7 strings. V'chayzer l'kosher sh'nei ksharim, we do a double knot. V'shuv kerech sh'mei karichos, then we again wrap this shamash around 8 times. V'kosher sh'nei ksharim, and we do a double knot. V'kerech achas esrei karichos, v'kosher sh'nei ksharim, then we do 11 wrapping rounds with a double knot. V'kerech shalosh esrei karichos, v'kosher sh'nei ksharim, and then wrap around again 13 times and do a double knot. So very quickly, we're taking the shamash, we are wrapping it around 7 times around, double knot, 8 times around, double knot, 11 times around, double knot, and finally 13 times around, and then a double knot. A beautiful pair of tzitzis. If you really want to do this right, so it looks beautiful, each of the spaces, that means where we tie these around, these are what we call the chulios, in between the knots, they should ideally all be the same width. That means in the first wrapping round, the first chulia, the first space where you've only got 7 wraps, you've got to distance them a little bit. So don't do the double knot tightly on top of those 7 strings. And in the second one, which is really very, very close, and it's very difficult to notice the difference because there's only 8 as opposed to 7, again, you should make them perhaps a little bit closer. Really the point is that there should be the same, ideally in a beautiful pair, there should be the same space between the 7 as there are in the 13. The space for each of these, the length of each string hanging down, that means from the first knot where it hangs down up until the very bottom of the tzitzis. How long should that be? Should be at the very least 12 agudolim, which is again, according to Reb Chaim Noah, just 24 centimeters, and according to the Chazon Ish, that would be 28.8. V'hanoi hu sheyeh kol hacholios biyachad shalish, v'achotim hatzeloyim shnei shalishim. Again, to make a beautiful pair of tzitzis, the bits that are the strings tied together in the knots should be 1/3, and the 3 bits of tzitzis that are hanging down, the 8 strings that are not tied, the last bit should be 2/3. Therefore, you should ensure that each space should be about 2 centimeters. And all the spaces should be 4 agudolim, and the strings that are hanging should be 8 agudolim, which is about 8 centimeters of the tied bit and about 16 centimeters of the free hanging bit, the longer part of the tzitzis. And if the tzitzis are longer than that, then you should also space out the knots and the chulios, these spaces, a bit more. You should ensure that when you're doing the double knot, you're not just wrapping 3 on one side and 5 on the other, but there should be 4 strings on each side that you're doing the double knot with. That you're tying 4 together with 4. That each string that you put in, you should try and remember that you're having the same strings on one side and the same strings on the other side, and those are the ones tying around each other. Ayin come on Siman Yud Aleph, see if you've given. Take a look at what we're going to learn later on in this Siman. Thank you for watching.